It's liberal privileged Joe Biden and the Democrats' defense of the indefensible. You can follow him on the Twitter at Donald J. Trump Jr. Mr. Trump Jr., how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Good to be back with you guys.
I don't know that that's true, but I appreciate it.
It's courteous.
I have fun. We make some headlines. I drop some bombs. It's fun. I feel like the venue. I can do a little bit more than I can on conventional TV. Yeah.
That's true, and that's this is going on tonight. Obviously, you were there the first night. I want to ask you what is the vibe before I get to kind of your book? What's the vibe there on the floor at the convention right now? Because it's so radically different from anything we've experienced. There are no people there. How would you describe it?
Well, there is no vibe on the floor because there's basically no floor. It was sort of interesting. I'm delivering a speech, and I do a lot of that. I'm pretty good at the retail stuff. I want big crowds. I feed off of it. I go totally unscripted. So instead, I'm in literally an empty auditorium. There were like 3 camera guys, but it's a massive auditorium, empty, reading a teleprompter. I go, man, this isn't my wheelhouse. This is Joe Biden's wheelhouse. Empty seats. Teleprompter. I was like, wow, they're trolling me. They put me in Joe Biden's spot, but I guess I can be pretty comfortable there too.
That's what they did with his convention. They just told him that he was at the Hyatt Ballroom B in Poughkeepsie, and he was like, "Oh, that's my speed."
They just told him he won already, which is why he feels he doesn't have to make an appearance, do an interview, or anything like that. I don't know that he knows.
Right? No, I think that's a good point. Well, okay, here's something I want to bring up. I hate to dish or do inside baseball, but there's this article I'm sure you know is circulating with an unnamed source from the New York Times saying that Donald Trump Jr. is saying. The quote is, dude, we're losing, and that you're scared. Is there any truth to that?
No, it's nonsense. I hear about all these inside sources. There's like 3 people I actually tell my real opinions to in politics, and I guarantee you none of them are leaking. It's one of those nonsense things. They tried to make it seem like, oh, we're afraid of what they may do to us afterwards. I don't know. I've been... they tried to throw me in jail for 3 years. Like, you think that could they do anything that they haven't already been doing for 4 years? You have nonsense attorney general investigations. You have announced conveniently on the first day of the RNC. Obviously, it has nothing to do with politics, Stephen. Nothing to do with politics.
Right, no, nothing to do with politics.
Just like they sued the NRA the same day that they announced their big ad buy for the campaign and for this election cycle. Obviously, has nothing to do with politics. It's pretty disgusting. So now at this point, I'm sort of, numb to all of that stuff. It doesn't even bother me anymore. We just wake up and we fight.
Yeah, and I would assume that they don't call you and ask for comment because that's what happened with yours truly, with Mashable and The Verge. And I just call them and say, hey, Steven Crowder with comment. And they go, what? I go, well, you're the editor-in-chief, Steven Crowder with comment. You wrote a piece about me. And they get really quiet, and you hear them going through their papers. You can hear the proverbial shit across the publishing floor. Speaking of politics and timing, your book. It's about Joe Biden, and it's about the swamp, and it's about the privilege of the Democrats and the indefensible. How did you get this? The timing, because you're cranking out books like the only person who cranks out so many books I know not named Dinesh.
Yeah, I like that. But honestly, I had no intention of doing another book. I did Triggered last year. It was awesome. I think I was on with you guys talking about it, and I had no intention of doing anything else. But then, this lockdown happened, Stephen. I couldn't go to work. I wasn't able to campaign. I wasn't able to do anything. I was locked up at home for 4 months. And I started doing just my own research and started saying, we're running against this guy. And the media's pretending like this is a blank slate. Now, Joe Biden, he's wonderful moderate. He's never done anything. I go, but he's been there for 50 freaking years. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's got to be something. So I started looking, and what I found was, amazing and or disgusting, depending on how you look at it. There's so much information there that the media has just totally abdicated their responsibility to talk about. Nothing to see here. And I don't just mean, the Hunter Biden corruption taking, $1.5 billion from the Chinese government. But Joe Biden's going to be tough on China. That's $30 million a year in fees, by the way, to your viewers who don't know how funds work. There's a 2% management fee. $30 million a year to Hunter Biden from the Chinese government. I go on the record with a very big banker from New York who's talking about how many years, decades it took him to get into China and investment. And, they diligence, everything. And, but they're giving crackhead Hunter Biden $1.5 billion in 5 days. He's like, it didn't happen.
We don't know if it was crack or run-of-the-mill cocaine. You won't be spreading rumors on my show, Junior.
Well, perhaps both. But
a
again,
speedball, really.
Donald Trump Jr. had a little bit of that. Hey, they got cocaine trending on Monday because they said that Don Jr. his eyes look blurry on the skate. It must be cocaine. I go, but the guy that got thrown out of the military for testing positive for cocaine, Hunter Biden.
But did you do a little cocaine? Did you do a little Colombian gold? No, nose candy? Was there a little?
If I took $1.5 from the Chinese government, it would be world news. Hunter Biden can take $1.5 billion, and there's nothing to see here. But then you have Joe Biden's help. I go on the record with Ronnie Jackson, who was the White House doctor. It wasn't Joe Biden's doctor, but he was the White House doctor, was around him. And, this is a guy that was a medical professional, a Navy admiral, was brought in by Obama and said, listen, as an American citizen, I've seen this guy and I've seen the decline in his mental aptitude. As a citizen, I'm just concerned. Like, it's not the same. And by the way, if you don't believe me, just go look at a video of Joe Biden on the floor of the Senate like 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah. It's not the same guy. This guy can't remember where he is 50% of the time, but we're going to give him the nuclear football because what could go wrong?
Well, I think with Joe Biden, what happens is you combine the like you said, the mental ineptitude with the propensity for just lying. And I don't mean lying like, listen, like you know this, like your dad obviously working in business, you exaggerate things sometimes, or you try and spin it into you try and lean into the positive. I'm talking about Joe Biden. He's the only guy I've ever seen in the public eye who makes up stories with people he's never met, places that don't exist at times when he couldn't have possibly been there, and no one checks him. It's not even comparable to anyone else.
No, beyond that, there's no interest to even look into it. They just take it as gospel. If it's a good story and can move the needle for him, it's as though it happened. If Donald Trump did something like that, oh my God, he's lying, he's this. So, like I said, there was so much there that I sat down and hired a researcher. I mean, I got like 40 pages of citations because I wanted to make sure, hey, this is locked in. But, so whether you're talking about Joe Biden, the family graft, his brother, getting involved in all these companies that were all of a sudden magically awarded, multi-billion-dollar contracts to build housing in Iraq. Minor details. He'd never built a home, but also minor details. Hunter Biden considered a board of a Ukrainian oil company, not speaking Ukrainian or not knowing anything about energy. But again,
that's a good thing, though, that he's never built a home. Could you imagine Habitat for Humanity and next to Brad Pitt with his Tinker Toys tool belt, Hunter Biden shows up? Don't worry, I got this, you Katrina people. I'm going to build one for you. I think it's a good thing that he's never laid a hand.
Yeah, but that's why, I came up with the book. It's called Liberal Privilege. Because if you're a liberal, if you're part of that party, if you're in that group, you can do, say anything. And there's no accountability.
Right. What's your favorite scandal? You cover a lot in the book.
It's abject hypocrisy. So, I thought it was a very fitting title because God knows, for me, hey, I'm the son of a rich guy. I get it. I've been very blessed. I'm certainly privileged. I don't pretend that I'm not. But man, the liberal privilege is a whole new extreme since we all get to hear about so much privilege these days.
And I think it's a great point.
They talk about as though, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with it. They're 100% kosher. This is fine.
Two things. Yes. First off, it's very telling to know that you had 4 months and you were so bored that you wrote a book, and apparently I'm not in your favorites. You couldn't give Uncle Stephen a call. And then you talk a lot about, I think it's a great point, that there's no accountability. There's so many scandals within the left, right, when we talk about the swamp. To me, someone who's in the swamp is somebody who really is sort of above the law. Not the Steven Seagal film where he runs like a girl, that's a classic. But so knowing that, what do you have one of your, you talk about a lot of them in the book. What would you have to pick as your favorite scandal or one that the media has just glossed over? Does one stick out that is just so egregious?
Well, I think a lot of them. The flip-flops on race. I think, honestly, right now, coming out of COVID-19, it's the, Joe Biden's going to be tough on China narrative. Joe Biden built China. Joe Biden has spent decades pushing for China's permanent status in the World Trade Organization because he had this foreign mentality of, hey, if we build up China, if we make them rich, maybe they'll become a democracy like us. Like, guys, this has failed for 50 years, and we're still pretending like this same playbook that hasn't worked in decades is going to work. It's asinine. Yeah. Joe Biden. Then you have the son taking it. Then you have his quotes. Oh, we're going to still take jobs from here. It's as Joe, if you know how to fix any of these things, why didn't you do it? If you were going to bring jobs to Americans, why'd you push for NAFTA and TPP?
Right.
Joe Biden has done, the only thing Joe Biden has ever created was he has exported our American dream and sent it to China. But now we are to believe that he's the guy to fix it. Guess what, Joe? If you could fix anything, if you could fix a freaking thing, why didn't you do it in the first half a century of your career? I've heard of late starters, Stephen. I know guys that take a little while to warm up, like 6 months into a job, maybe a year. He's been there for half a fucking century. Okay? Seriously.
Yeah. No, he is a late bloomer, though.
Wait a minute. Don't you think he would have started by now? Don't you think, now you're going to do it? Yeah, obviously. You should just believe this.
Right. Yeah.
He's obviously going to do it now. He was just warming up, guys. It was all a warm-up act.
No, I think, but to be fair, he is a late bloomer. He only started growing plugs in his 50s. So, and that's like me. I started shaving in my 20s. We all have our time frame. Let me ask you this. How do you think you guys? Oh, actually, one more point I wanted to make. That's why Hillary Clinton, by the way, to parallel with Biden, I think the leftist media does not realize how important that point that you just made is. Barack Obama was basically a junior senator with no voting record. We pretty much knew that he voted president, except he was really, really pro-abortion. The reason that I think he beat Hillary Clinton in the primary is because of her support of NAFTA, and I know a lot of lifelong Democrats who just picked Obama because of that, and Joe Biden has the same kind of track record. My final question here, speaking of that, the Midwest, how do you think Team Trump wins this? Do you think it's Ohio, Pennsylvania, the so-called Rust Belt, or what do you think might be the biggest surprise?
Well, listen, I like what I'm seeing in Minnesota. I like what I see in some of these states because, honestly, Stephen, people are looking at what's going on, and they're saying enough is enough. They're seeing riots, and I don't just mean in Portland and stuff like that, but, look at what's going on in Wisconsin. I mean, that's a suburb.
Yeah.
This isn't right, and I'm watching. And the DNC last week, right? It was a 4-day, never-ending I Hate America Zoom call. It felt like I was watching a less intellectual version of my child's kindergarten Zoom. It was a mess. I guess they lost all of their production value ever since Harvey Weinstein went to prison. But true story. True story, guys.
I don't know that you can say true story, but I like it.
But here at the RNC, you're seeing people who have lived the American dream, people who've experienced incredible stories and got to tell them in a place that honestly it could only be done in America. This isn't something that you could happen in Cuba. I mean, when you see Max Alvarez the other night, when you saw the Herschel Walker story, juxtaposed with Vernon Jones. I mean, so many of these speakers with these incredible stories, and be like, man, I'm watching this. It's like, this makes me proud to be an American. Yeah. Last week, if you liked anything about America, you're a xenophobe racist, obviously.
Wait. Was that a Mongoloid mixed with Arnold Schwarzenegger? I don't know what voice that was.
Yes, that's exactly.
Do America. I don't know what it was.
Terrible people. You want to live you want a couple of your taxpayer dollars to go to your children rather than to pay for college for illegals. Oh, it's so terrible that you would want that for yourself out of money that you've worked for decades. Oh, you're horrible.
Now there's a bit of Steve Zahn in there. This is a bizarre impression.